Water under pressure. Why the source of life has become a source of tension. As populations grow and supplies decline, what can be done to safeguard the world's most precious resource? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Sue Turton. We never know the worth of water till the well is dry. The words of a 17th century scholar striking a chord in the modern world and raising concerns about the risks and challenges of potential conflicts. An international conference is taking place at The Hague in the Netherlands on water security and peace. Delegates there are promoting a new catchphrase, water diplomacy, emphasising the need for cooperation, negotiation and arbitration to address recurring conflicts and to head off the risks of potential wars over water. The UN estimates that 783 million people don't have access to clean water. That's 11% of the world's population. And what fresh water there is coming under increasing pressure from things like population growth, pollution and global warming. Conflicts over water generally fall into two categories. The first is simply a fight between two groups over water itself for consumption, sanitation and commerce. The second, conflict that arises from the way we deal with water scarcity. Say the impact a new dam might have on a community downstream. Or the privatisation of water, a trend that's taken root in some South American countries where it's being sold as a commodity, like oil. The conference looking into water security is being organised by the Hague Institute for Global Justice. And joining us now is the group's head of water diplomacy, Dr. Patrick Hunchens. In Stockholm, we have Dr. Hökentrup, Managing Director of the Knowledge Services Department at the Stockholm International Water Institute. And also at The Hague is Aaron Wolf, Director of the Water Conflict Management Programme at Oregon State University. Mr. Wolf, if I can start with you, just give us a picture of how bad this situation is, a global picture really, of the scarcity of water.
Thanks. In your introduction, you mentioned half of the world lacks access to sanitation. Somewhere between 1.5 million and 2.5 million people die every year simply because of a lack of access to a safe, stable water supply. So in terms of crisis, this is as big as anything. It's as big as HIV, AIDS, or malaria, and it's bigger than just about anything else in terms of destruction. It's bigger than tsunamis, earthquakes, all the wars in any given year put together. So in terms of a crisis, this is right up there with the major ones facing the globe.
Hökentrup, how does this manifest itself amongst communities on the ground? Things like, I know if children are looking for water, seeking out water for their families, they're not in education. You know, does it mean also that there's a lack of food if there's a lack of water? Just kind of give us a sense of what it is on the ground or where communities are really struggling.
Well, I think the water crisis is playing out in so many different ways at the local level. For many people, and in particular women and girls, it's a daily struggle to just go and fetch water. Sometimes they have to walk several kilometers every day, with a lot of implications that girls cannot attend school in a proper way, for example. Of course, there are huge health implications of not having sufficient access to water, as well as when it comes to the production of food. So I think here, in terms of setting priorities for local communities, water is one of the top priorities for how communities should increase their livelihood opportunities.
Patrick Hunchens, we talked about water diplomacy, this phrase. I suppose you are the ultimate water diplomat in the position you're definitely holding this week. How do you police water security?
Water security is a major issue on the international agenda, but in practice we can see that cooperation over water is very difficult. So in this conference we try to address the question how we can improve existing tools and methods for solving water conflicts and water prevention, and what diplomatic tools are needed to address recurring conflicts.
We're talking about how a scarcity of water can lead to conflict, and here's the reality. The construction of the Belo Monte Dam in Brazil, expected to be the world's third largest, has angered indigenous people in the Amazon basin. And a series of dams have reduced water flow from the Tigris and the Euphrates, causing tension between Turkey, Iraq and Syria. 5 countries in Central Asia are competing for water from the Sur Darya and Amu Darya rivers. The only water source for the Palestinians is completely controlled by Israel, and Egypt draws almost all of its water from the Nile River. But it runs through 9 other countries. And the construction of Africa's biggest dam in Ethiopia is causing concern, as Rory Challens reports from Cairo.
For millennia, Egyptians have viewed the Nile as a gift from God. But what God has given them, they fear man might take away. This is the Renaissance Dam, which is under construction on the Blue Nile in Ethiopia, where a majority of the Nile's waters originate. When operational, the multi-billion-dollar hydroelectric development will be Africa's biggest. But Egyptians aren't happy.
It will give Ethiopia power to control the flow of the Nile, which will lead to a change in the strategic balance of power in the region to Ethiopia's advantage against Egypt's interests. And this has been a long-held Ethiopian dream.
Fatih Abdul Hay's land used to be irrigated by water from the Nile, but mismanagement has blocked the canals that brought it to him. Now he relies on water pumped from wells.
If they build the dam on the Nile, it will definitely affect Egypt. It will affect the underground water. This is because the underground water is linked to the Nile. If they build the dam, there will be no more underground water, and we won't be able to farm.
Water security is a vitally important issue for Egypt. The global standard for water scarcity is 1,000 cubic meters per person per year. Now, the average Egyptian can only access 700 cubic meters a year, so the country is already water scarce. But now factor this in. The population of Egypt is due to increase by nearly 50% by 2050.
Ethiopia says its dam will not have serious long-term impacts downstream.
Egyptians have to believe us, have to believe Ethiopia. Ethiopia believes in equitable and reasonable utilization of resources, win-win approach, and into cooperation.
But until the reservoir is filled, Egypt can expect a reduced flow. 5 years is Ethiopia's aim, though it could take longer. The geopolitics of the Renaissance Dam are tense, and how to share this vital resource is clearly difficult. The Nile might be seen as God's gift to Egypt, but it also belongs to the Ethiopians, Sudanese and other upstream countries too. Rory Challens, Al-Jazeera, Cairo.
We're listening to some stories from Egyptian farmers. Farmers are really very concerned about whether this will affect their water supply. Patrick Hutchins, how do you become the diplomat in between groups like that, where you have obviously a very large dam that hopefully is going to do good for an awful large part of Africa, but you've got much smaller concerns downstream as to how it will affect them?
Water diplomacy needs to be improved to help many regions in the world who are suffering water insecurity. More than half of the population of the world is currently confronted with water insecurity. That means that there's more demand than water availability. Water diplomacy is instrumental in creating opportunities for cooperation, and this might include joint fact-finding, trust building, also conflict prevention and conflict resolution, but also pursuits of social justice.
Do you find that governments are, sorry to interrupt, do you find that governments are open, agencies, authorities open to come and sit around the table and discuss things like this, where maybe you have a large concern, a conglomerate, a company, and then you have much smaller concerns, say a tribe that's complaining about how maybe a river's been diverted from them? Are people willing to sit down and discuss and debate?
We can see that all stakeholders have a joint interest, so there are mutual gains to discuss water conflicts. We can see that we have many more agreements than the number of cases where conflict has escalated. So in general, we can see that all stakeholders who are dealing with this issue are more than willing to talk about how to solve water conflicts. But in general, water cooperation is very difficult because it is a very complex issue where many interests are involved, many stakeholders are sitting around the same table. And it's not only about finding technical solutions, because every situation has its own political and socio-economic and cultural context which needs to be taken into account. And in our view, it's very important to have the stakeholders on the table to share information between them and also to build trust and to find a consensus-based solution.
Aaron Wolf, you're a man that crunches the figures, crunches the numbers on all these disputes and conflicts. Do you get the feeling that governments are willing to recognise, companies are willing to recognise really the impact maybe that they're having with various projects?
Well, in a way, they have to. It's not just the countries that are involved, but oftentimes these major projects are funded by either development banks like the World Bank or the Africa Development Bank, or they're funded by private interests. And often that funding comes precisely with those kinds of strings to make sure that people will sit at the table. So an environmental impact assessment must be done. A social impact assessment must be done. A plan for resettlement must be done. And even though a lot of times these major projects cause tensions, oftentimes what we're talking about are bringing people out of poverty. So it's easy from the north to be able to say, well, we've built all our dams, we've deforested all our lands, and now you in the developing world shouldn't. Or the opposite, we can say, yes, these are really important, and please learn the lessons that we've learned over time about how to have healthier conversations, how to make sure the impacts are not disproportionately felt by the indigenous or the poor.
How bad could this indeed get? Are we talking about actual conflict, real conflict breaking out, if we don't recognise the impact that water scarcity is having on people?
Well, I think we have to be very cautious here, and I think to realize that there are big potential threats here, not only between countries. I would perhaps say that there are even greater risks when it comes to fighting over water between local communities, for example, or there could be different types of water users at the subnational level struggling for the same water source between farmers and other economic sectors, for example. But I think also that we should use some sensibility here, because we should also recognize that there are a lot of collaborative efforts taking place around the globe, in fact, between nations as well as between stakeholders at the subnational level. So I think here that maybe we also, because sometimes we have a tendency to sort of always see the negative side or be very pessimistic, and we should also acknowledge that over the years, I mean, there are several hundred agreements in place between nations, for example, that recognize in different ways how we should share a particular water source, perhaps even how we could share the benefits beyond the water as such. And I think here we really have one of the key issues. So what then would we like to do to improve collaboration? And I think if we see it at the national level and how countries can negotiate with each other, perhaps in more constructive ways, is that they see water as a broader package of other things. It could be economic collaboration, for example. So I think here we have one way of how we can promote collaboration even more, and seeing water in a broader regional or international collaboration.
Could you share with us the details of maybe a couple of those positive projects you're saying where water scarcity has been recognised and actually something has been done about it?
Well, I think we can look at here in Europe, for example, and where there is several agreements around European rivers, which has been very positive for cleaning up the rivers, and I think it's been here in Europe, it's been more an issue of water quality and getting rid of pollution in different ways. I think we should also recognize that there is collaboration, for example, between India and Pakistan when it comes to shared waters. Even though there could be different types of political tensions, there is still some joint activities and cooperation on water. So I think here that's important to also show sort of the good cases here.
Aaron Wolf, can you give us some ideas of some of the positive ones? I'm thinking maybe about cross borders, where you're really struggling with two different countries that you have to bring to the table, and where projects maybe have been successfully resolved.
Oh, sure. So as Håkan mentioned, there's a rich history of water cooperation. There's 600 treaties around water that have been signed since World War II. We at Oregon State did a study of international interactions between countries around water. 2/3 of the time we do anything around water, it's positive. Water brings enemies into the room. It gives them a language to talk about their shared future. Israelis and Arabs have collaborated around water, Indians and Pakistanis, as Håkan mentioned, Azeris and Armenians. Basically, everywhere you find enmity and shared rivers, oftentimes the countries will cooperate around a project or an agreement on water quality where they won't agree on anything else. I do want to mention also, if we're looking at on the violent side, there's very little cross-border violence specifically around water. And to find the last water war in history, a war between two nations specifically around water, we have to go back 4,500 years between the city-states of Lagash and Umma. So our record around water diplomacy and water cooperation is pretty good.
Perhaps the water is sometimes used. I'm thinking about the Palestinians who have to go to the Israelis for water. It's still sometimes used even if it's not open conflict, but certainly for influence in areas like that particular area itself.
Absolutely. There's no question that water's caught up in larger political issues. People who disagree about other things will find a way also to disagree about water. We should note, too, though, Israelis and Palestinians, even though it's a source of tension, have found ways to agree since the 1950s. Implicit agreements were in place since 1953. It turned out to be the basis of the water components of the Israel-Jordan peace treaty. Israelis and Palestinians, even in very tense, difficult times, both intifadas, were able to find ways to cooperate simply because the system is so integrated. You can't separate out the water infrastructure there. You can't separate out between an Israeli and Palestinian delivery or treatment system. It's just too integrated. They have to cooperate in order to get anything done at all.
Patrick Hutchins, you have some of the main stakeholders, the main authorities involved in dealing with this huge subject. What would be the message to them if they don't pay attention, if they don't recognise that the scarcity of water is going to have an impact in the future? Really, I suppose the worst case scenario, what would that be?
In addition to the previous speakers, I think it's also important to mention that many of the conflicts are taking place at the local level. You can see a huge increase in the potential of conflict at the local level. At the same time, we have been relatively successful to find agreements at the international level, but at the local level, a lot of work is to be done. So one important recommendation is also to find solutions how to deal with multi-levels of governance, where stakeholders at different levels, going from the local level to the national level to the international level, can collaborate with each other. We are working at this moment, for example, in Yemen and in Vietnam, where local water users are confronted with dwindling water resources. In Vietnam, they have also additional challenges related to sea level rise, which causes less fresh water availability for them. During the summer, they have even to deal with more extreme droughts, while in the winter they have to deal with floods. So all kinds of water problems are coming together in one local area, and the local people there have to deal with this somehow, and they need support from the top down. But also that the governments need to listen on what is happening on the ground. So that we need to fine-tune, we need to find a balance between top-down and bottom-up approaches to solve with this enormous potential for conflict.
Herken Troop, on that particular approach, are the channels open for the smaller guy, for the Egyptian farmer, for the tribe perhaps that suddenly sees the situation around them changing? Are the channels open for them to have an impact, to get redress, to find a way of getting their voices heard at the moment, or do they have to be improved?
Well, I think those channels definitely have to be improved. And I think for people out there, regular farmers, regular workers, depending on water for their livelihood, that they need much better access to decision-making systems in different ways. They need more information about their own water resource, for example. I mean, many times there are not really available data on okay, what's the level of groundwater resource in my particular area? How much rainfall is there? So I think many times these basic hydrological data are missing, which make it more difficult for farmers to plan ahead, for example. And also when it comes to how authorities and governments sometimes are taking a very top-down approach in their decision-making, not really leaving room for people to have a say, to have some of the central stakeholders have a say in decision-making processes. So I think here there is a lot of things that could be done to improve governance systems within countries. Could also be that there needs to be much more dialogue platforms developed between communities in different countries, for example, in discussions of transboundary waters, because I think when the negotiations are taking place at that high level between nation states, the little guy has very little voice and say in that.
Aaron Wolf, we are also talking about things like pollution, things like global warming. Obviously, those are enormous topics that aren't going to be solved by projects, but how much has that been taken into account, and how much can you sort of assist with the way you crunch the data to show the governments how they can help?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The changing issues are causing both increased dangers, things like rising sea level, worse storms, population growth, economic growth. All of these things are adding to the dangers around water resources in general. And yet at the same time, we also have new tools. Remote sensing, being able to monitor from above what's going on the ground. It means countries can't keep water secrets anymore. The idea of moving water through food. Tony Allen coined the term virtual water to talk about the water that gets moved through trade in food products. This is one of the ways in which we're able to deal with shortages and scarcity, and I think also the fact that we now can communicate around the globe instantly helps us find better solutions faster, and especially the impacted populations, again indigenous groups, the poor, can communicate collectively around the world to help come up with solutions and to put pressure on respective governments and international organizations to help with representation and pressure.
Is enough money being devoted by governments to keep pace with the increase in water scarcity?
No, absolutely not. When we're speaking in optimistic terms, I think we're speaking about political cooperation. There's a rich history of that happening. What there isn't is simply the poverty alleviation, access to safe, stable water supply. This is the kind of crisis, ecosystems being degraded around the world. Again, this is a crisis on order of anything that's out there. And we absolutely are not putting the resources into it that need to be. The focus on diplomacy is terrific. It helps us get the right people in the room. But unless the resources move, we're simply going to lose more people. More people will suffer, will die. Ecosystems will continue to be be degraded. This, I think, is the real crisis. And this also is the kind of more nuanced security issue that people that don't have access to safe, stable water end up moving to cities that can't support them, end up politically disgruntled. This ends up in regional security issues where the root cause and solution is around poverty and poverty alleviation.
Very interesting to talk to you and all three of you gentlemen. If I could thank you, Patrick Hunchins, Haakon Troop and Aaron Wolf. Thank you for joining us. And thank you for joining us. You can watch this programme again on our website. That's at aljazeera.com/programmes. And why not connect with us on Twitter? You can find us at AJ Inside Story. I'm Sue Turton. Goodbye for now.